Could you break down how this 2026 Knicks championship team? I knew this was going to come up. Art, gladly, and I'll tell you this. It's a really interesting thing. It really is. Okay? Over here, you have the 69-70 New York Knicks. One of the great basketball teams and well-balanced basketball teams of all time. A center, Willis Reed. Now, what made the Knicks, as you know, was they had Reed and they had a center who was an all-star named Walt Bellamy. They had a guard named Howard Komives. They traded Howard Komives and Walt Bellamy for Dave DeBusschere, which not only brought DeBusschere to this team, one of the great two-way players in the NBA, but also moved Reed to center where he belonged. He was ill-cast for forward. So it changed everything for the Knicks. So now you have Willis Reed. You have Dave DeBusschere. You have one of the legendary collegians of the generation at the small forward spot in Bill Bradley. You have a guard who was thought of at that time as more of a defensive guard than anything else, which we learned was not the case, in Walt Frazier. And a very good pro in Dick Barnett. Now, you also had a very interesting bench. Now, remember, the first weapon off that bench was one of the biggest collegians in the country, Cazzie Russell, who would go in for Bill Bradley at the small forward spot. And remember, if Cazzie came in and their bench was called the Minutemen, their bench was better than this Knicks bench. That would be the big difference on these teams. The Minutemen were a terrific bench. If Cazzie came in and hit his first shot from the corner, he was going to hit 6 more in a row. He was one of the great lethal streak shooters. Cazzie Russell could have started for any team in basketball. He was a basketball legend. So you had Bradley and Cazzie Russell, who were two incredible big stars when they emerged to this Knicks team. Frazier, who evolved from this defensive guard into this all-around guard. DeBusschere, one of the great two-way forwards in the sport. Okay, great bench. They called them the Minutemen. Stallworth, Russell, Nate Bowman, down the list. Now, on the other side, we have Towns. We have OG. What a great matchup DeBusschere and OG is. That's what made me smile. We have Bridges and Dollar Bill, and they'd be beating each other up all over the place. You have Frazier. And you have Barnett going up against, obviously, Brunson. And you want to say Hart. Now, you can play Bridges against Bradley. You can play, which I would because of the movement. You could play Hart against Barnett or Frazier. I could mix and match them all I want. I could bring Bridges to the backcourt and put Hart against Bradley, except that's going to take Hart away from the basket because Bradley is going to run around on the perimeter like a madman. Okay. The movement, the Knicks' offensive ball movement was incredibly exquisite. Exquisite. They had great long-range shooters. Bradley, DeBusschere, who would have been an incredible three-point shooter if they had had the three then. Now, the emergence of Frazier as an offensive player is something that took hold. Remember, Game 7 of the 69-70 series. Game 7. Walt Frazier plays the perfect game. 36 points, 19 assists. 7 rebounds, 5 steals, shoots 12 of 12 from the foul line and 12 of 17 from the floor. I don't know how you could play a better 7th game ever than he played. Now, often the Knicks, because of Frazier's larcenous ways as a ball hawk, they would put I would not have been surprised if they started Barnett on Brunson and then let Frazier help out and ball hawk. That could be very plus how you utilize Bridges and Hart is interchangeable. You could play Hart on Bradley, you could play Bridges on Bradley. You might want to play Bridges on Bradley rather than the backcourt, but both those backcourt players are going to be an issue for Hart. So where you put Hart, you can decide, okay? But Bradley's going to run him ragged because he never stopped moving. He was perpetual motion. And the Knicks offense offensively was such a thing of beauty. The Knicks in the playoffs this year got that with Towns and with the way they orchestrated the offense and the movement off Towns and then the way they moved the ball to get three-point shots. Remember, it's a completely different game now. The three-point goal wasn't in there, and that team would have loved the three-point goal. Cassie would have been one of the great three-point shooters in all of basketball because he would have made that corner three so often. He would have made Champagny look like a bad shooter. That's how good he would have been out of the corner with the three. He would have been insane with the three out of the corner. The short corner three would have been Cassie's. He would have had games where he made 8 of them. That's how good he was off the bench. I like the matchup of the 5. Now, this team is going to expect Brunson to score. The Knicks team, Willis could be the high scorer, but in any one game, almost anybody could be the high scorer on that team. That's how versatile they was, although Willis was the focal point. They all could score. They all could shoot. They all could pass the ball. They had great versatility. If you're asking me which team is better, the 69-70 team is better because of the bench and because that quintet was like was always a finely tuned machine. The Knicks struggle at times on the offensive end. They have clear role players and guys who will do the dirty work and don't have to score to be effective. Hart doesn't have to score to be effective. Bridges doesn't have to score to be effective. This team was much more nuanced and much more balanced. So if you're asking me, I would tell you this. I love the matchup with the two teams. The bench would have been a clear plus for the 69-70 Knicks. And I'm not discounting how good the bench was at times for this Knicks team, but that bench was better. They even had their own little name, the Minutemen. And I like the virtuoso combinations of the 69-70 team, which is considered, listen, that's not a knock. They're considered one of the great teams of all time. So, but that's a fun question. It really is. Thank you for that one. I like that one. It's a very good question with some perspective. I like that one. I really do.